This is Andy Gutierrez from StarWars.com, and you are listening to Coffee with Kenobi with Dan Z. This is the podcast you're looking for.
This is James Arnold Taylor, and you're listening to Coffee with Kenobi. I have a good feeling about this.
Hello, my friends, and welcome to Coffee with Kenobi, show number 370. We are your spoiler-free place for Star Wars discussion, analysis, and rhetoric. I'm your host, Dan Z, drinking One Nation coffee out of the Force Awakens coffee mug that Hallmark created, in 2015 when The Force Awakens came out. It says The Force Awakens, coffee does too on the inside. It's got Kylo Ren on the outside of the mug. It is awesome. And it's awesome to be able to spend today chatting with you about The Mandalorian. On today's show, James Burns of Jedi News and Matt Sheehan of WMBD News here in Central Illinois, where I am located, are going to talk with us about The Heiress, a spectacular episode, Chapter 11 of The Mandalorian. So pull up a chair, grab your favorite coffee mug, and let's have some coffee with Kenobi.
So who talks first? You talk first? I talk first.
Joining us today for a cup of coffee to break down Chapter 11 of The Mandalorian, The Heiress, we have two guests. First, we have returning guest. He is the brand director of Jedi News, the one and only James Burns. James, welcome back to Coffee with Kenobi.
Hiya, Dan. Thank you very much for having me. How you doing?
Doing very well, my friend. And you?
Yeah, absolutely fine. Thank you. All good. All good.
Good. Glad to hear. Well, because you were based in the UK, this worked out well because both of my guests have some different time challenges with their jobs and where they live in the world. So we're going to bring in our other guest host. This is his first appearance on Coffee with Kenobi, but he's certainly no stranger to Star Wars. He is an on-air personality like no other. I'm talking about Matt Sheehan. Matt, welcome to Coffee with Kenobi.
Dan, thanks for having me. Been really looking forward to this. And, man, I think we got a great episode to talk about this week.
It worked out great. So, Matt, for those of you who saw, of course, when the book came out, I did a number of press events, including some local television coverage. And Matt is the morning anchor for WMBD News. And, of course, we became fast friends because Star Wars is the great bridge that brings everybody together. And Matt is not only a huge Star Wars fan, but he's also a huge WWE fan. So this is going to tie in very nicely.
Yes, absolutely.
I love it. All right, so gentlemen, let's just talk about the very, very beginning. Naturally, we've got the Mandalorian, Din Djarin, and the child. They're going to, the Razor Crest is in really bad shape. So, James, they end up going to, I believe it's Mon Cala. I think that's the planet where the Admiral Akbar, he's the most famous inhabitant, is from. Mm-hmm. And so talk about sort of that re-entry and the excitement of that opening sequence.
I have to say the effects for that opening sequence are absolutely stunning, and I think ILM did an amazing job. I was just watching when the Razor Crest was lifted out of the sea, which looked like some form of AT-AT. It was a really, really cool vehicle, I guess, aquatic vehicle. I love the way that it picked up the Razor Crest, dumped it on the dock, and the water coming off of it. I actually watched that scene 3 or 4 times because the effects there were stunning.
They are, and Matt, we've sort of grown accustomed to the Mandalorian, especially in this very early season 2, that it never goes well for him. But I don't know about you, but when I was watching it and we realized that he had to do a manual re-entry, and he says, it's going to get pretty hot in here. I thought that was more of a metaphor, not actually the thing was going to get on fire. Talk about your reaction to the opening sequence.
Well, Dan, I think what The Mandalorian does so well is comedic timing. That's just so important because you do have the comedy aspect with the show. Obviously, you've got some incredible action, as we know, and character development. But as James was talking, picking up the Razor Crest out of the ocean, if you will, but when it fell in, just that timing of you're like, oh, he finally made it, and then nope, boom, right in the water. You're like, okay, of course this would happen to Mando and the gang. So that's what from this scene, something that just really stuck out to me was just the timing of it all and just the unluckiness, that Mando can sometimes have.
I thought that reunion was a bit weird because how did the frog lady tell her husband that they were going to arrive at that particular moment? when they were tumbling out the sky, maybe I should suspend my disbelief, but it just seemed really, really coincidental that he was waiting on the dock for her.
Mm-hmm.
And that just threw me off for a second. And I was like, well, how? And then I just carried on and I just let it play out. But it just seemed a bit odd that he was there then, especially with all the trouble with re-entry and getting the Razor Crest out of the ocean and stuff. That was probably the only bit of the whole episode that I thought, don't really get that bit. But
interesting. See, I for some reason I was very moved by it. I thought these are people dressed up like frogs. Why am I getting so emotional about it? But I thought it was really kind of touching because we reminded yet again that this woman, she is trying to reunite with her husband, and she probably didn't know she would ever see him again. And he was just overjoyed. I thought it was some excellent acting, and some great puppetry. And it just kind of made the sort of the grind of the last episode and the frustrations of that episode. It gave us a nice payoff, which I thought was a nice emotional beat. But Matt, what about you?
Yeah, and Dan, you know this because we've texted, but I'm a big fan of the Frog Lady. I just think that character is just, first of all, hilarious. I mean, just when, they're going in the Razor Crest and she's, holding on to the seat and to, making sure she's not falling around. It really reminds me, and I've seen plenty of memes, it's like when you go 1 mile an hour over the speed limit and you're driving with your mom and it's the Frog Lady, freaking out. It's just hilarious. So I'm a big fan of the Frog Lady. I will say, kind of with what James said, was a little disappointed that it just happened almost immediately. I thought that there was going to have to be a little more work to be done to find the Frogman. And it was just like James said, he was just there. He was just there right on the dock. But Dan, like you said, it was a great scene. The emotion, it made you feel good, right? The reunion that they had. And so, I mean, I enjoyed it. I wish that there was a little, I had high hopes that somehow the Frog Lady would be a bigger deal than just kind of a connection of the dots. And we could be wrong. We could come back in a couple episodes, but to my knowledge and what I've seen, that's just what she was. She played her part to somehow get them to Mon Cala, which is okay, totally fine. But that's just the kind of way it is.
Yeah, absolutely. So then there is the reunion, and we get on to the fact that he's looking for Mandalorians. Do you know if there's anyone from my kind? So he goes to this little hole in the wall place where they have this wonderful little way to deliver food where you just kind of squeeze it into everybody's bowls, and kind of add a little bit of real worldism into it, which I thought was really entertaining and quite handy, I guess, for lack of a better word. And that was not supposed to be a pun. And then we find out, hey, you know what? Here's someone that can help you. And then we get the species, most famously noted in the recreation of Return of the Jedi, the squid head. Which of course was the one. And James, what's the name of that species? I can't remember off the top of my head.
Tessek.
Oh, of course, Tesseks. Yes. So often Tesseks are portrayed as not necessarily the most friendly, but there wasn't necessarily a vibe that there was going to be danger, even though maybe because we were all just sort of relieved that was happening. But then we get this sequence that I was very stunned by. And before the season started, I think I'd said on the show, I have a feeling that we're going to see the child in peril a lot, and it's going to cause a little bit of anxiety. And boy, did we ever! They're on the open seas, and for some reason they have a giant aquarium at the bottom of their boat, or either that or just a gateway into the ocean itself. But the child is forced into this body of water where this creature that almost looks like a miniature sarlacc without long tentacles jumps up, swallows the child whole, and then we're off to the races. James, talk about that sequence.
Yeah, I mean, it all happened so quickly. I mean, they said to Mando, your kid really needs to see this. It's an amazing experience, and we really want you to see it. And then straight away, as soon as the gates are open, push the child in, and then it was non-stop. I mean, I don't know where those other three characters just literally came from, whether they were over the water already or on the dock, but they were there before you could bat an eyelid. And they really came to the rescue. And I thought it was really, really nice that Mando jumped straight in. There was no hesitation. He just wanted to save the child. That was the most important thing. As I guess any father would. I mean, of course, we'd all do that if one of our children had been thrown into a pool or been put at peril.
Right. Sure.
And it was just non-stop from there.
It was, but was it confusing sort of why that creature like in the cargo hold, or was that how did that work?
I thought the creature was in the cargo hold because it sounded to me like that it was something that they were doing on a regular basis. From what he was saying, we haven't fed you this morning, but we're going to feed it now. So to me, it was part of the ship.
Yeah, I thought so too. So that might be something that they may explore later. It may just sort of hey, this is just a little bit of verisimilitude, just go with it. But before we get to the three Mandalorians that show up, Matt, anything you want to say about that sequence?
I mean, Dan, you hit it on the head with the anxiety that, the peril of the child, goes through. I mean, I did feel some sort of relief because right as the sea creature basically surrounds the child, with its what appear to be, 6 or 7 teeth, or, all these teeth, you see the little thing that the child is in shut. So you're like, okay, that armor has to hold somehow. And James said it best, but just when Mando just jumps right in, again, you knew the child was going to be okay and that Mando was going to do everything in his power to make that happen. So a very high intensity scene, which is great. But man, yeah, you kind of could feel it just building too with the Tesseract or the Corrin just kind of being like, yeah, get a little closer. Oh, you need to get a little closer. The child needs to see. You're like, oh, this is going to turn out bad. So,
yeah. And did it ever? The only thing that I thought threw me was, why is he trying to get out of the water first? Why isn't he diving down to try to rescue the child from the gold of that beast right away? That's the one thing. And I don't usually poke holes at things like that, but I thought, why isn't he running down to save the child right away? Either of you have any ideas on that?
Really, the only, yeah.
I'm not sure. I mean, it could have been a breathing thing, maybe. I don't know. He was also being shot at as well. So I think there was a lot going on.
And maybe he did have, like you said, Matt, maybe he just had faith that armor would hold up.
Yeah. Well, kind of what I was thinking, at least, was when he came out of the water and was grabbing at the what he was, underneath and stuff, he was really out of breath. And I don't know, I just kind of assumed, maybe being in this armor that he would have been able to breathe underwater with it and stuff like that. But maybe, as James mentioned, maybe it was a breathing thing. And with all this armor on and the helmet, that it even constricted his airways and stuff even more. I'm not really sure there.
Right. Yeah, it's kind of interesting. But the real home run, and James, you alluded to this a little bit ago, suddenly we have the arrival of 3 Mandalorians. I did not expect this. I mean, of course, we knew that there were rumblings that Katie Sackhoff was going to show up. And, but I try to do a really good job of putting that out of my brain so I can just enjoy each episode. And I said to my son, oh my gosh, it's Bo-Katan. It's Bo-Katan. Because as soon as you see the armor color that's different, the lighter blue, then you turn around and you see her helmet and you think, oh my gosh, she's here. And gentlemen, the thrill of seeing that, especially when we're so used to this character from the Clone Wars and Star Wars Rebels, was unlike anything I'd felt in Star Wars in a very long time. James, you must have been particularly thrilled being such a big fan of Clone Wars as well.
Yeah, I mean, the minute that they landed on the deck and you saw her helmet, a huge smile. I mean, it was so nice to see, and it was when she removed her helmet, and obviously we don't see the look on Mando's face, but we can see his reaction to her removing the helmet was just amazing. And I mean, that sent shivers down my spine, because seeing her sort of come to life, literally, you know, from a piece of animation to a real life character, and the voice and everything else the same, was fantastic. And I loved the way that they brought her to life. I loved the costume. I mean, the whole thing was spot on.
It was absolutely thrilling. And then, so then you get to see, you know, it's Katie Sackhoff. But Matt, I'm going to go out on a limb that says, as thrilled as you were about seeing Bo-Katan, we mentioned at the top, so you're a huge fan of the WWE. Sasha Banks, you know, whose real name is, let's see, it's what is her real name?
Isn't it Victoria?
Oh, Mercedes Bernardo.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And she plays a warrior named Casca Reeves. So before you sort of talk about seeing her on there, and you and I had talked, hey, wouldn't this be a great episode for you to be on if Sasha Banks actually shows up? What is Sasha Banks like on the WWE for people who don't watch wrestling? And so why should we be excited about her? Tell me about that.
Right. First of all, charismatic. She really is. She has an attitude about her of just confidence, and she's called the legit boss. Is kind of, you know, her nickname per se, and that's because she is. She's a boss. She comes down, she's got shades on, you know, kind of this jewelry around her knuckles, and you know, needless to say, she's great in the ring. So she's very charismatic, very talented in-ring performer, absolutely. But what's also very important is that she can cut a good promo. That's another very important thing in the WWE, and so that's why, even if maybe you're not the greatest technical wrestler, and a lot of people would agree with me on this, that John Cena is not the greatest technical wrestler. You know, there are people that come up from USA wrestling or college wrestling, NCAA, and they're good technical wrestlers, but they can't speak on the mic. What made John Cena stand out was his mic skills with a combination of pure strength, right? But also there is a lot of in-ring talent. So she can connect those dots of the in-ring talent and the talent on the mic, which floats in perfectly to, you know, shooting off a career in Hollywood potentially. And this was a great first step for her. I haven't really seen her in anything else. I mean, she's in like cricket commercials and stuff like that because they have a partnership. But this was the first big time Hollywood per se show or movie that she's been in. And so, yeah, that's why I think that, you know, she can do all that stuff. She can do the fighting moves and stuff like that on the ship. And it's, you know that she is physically able to do that. So it was pretty awesome for me to see her.
Good. Well, that's actually a really good explanation. And you know, a Mandalorian, you know, it's very clear that Sasha Banks has the swagger, has the gravitas about her, and she dives in to save the child, and shortly thereafter brings him up. And then we get this wonderful moment, James, where the Mandalorian holds the child in a very nurturing, loving way and says, "Are you okay?" and checks on him and kind of tucks on like his shirt underneath his chin. And I thought that was really, really cool and really important to see the Mandalorian in that fashion.
Yeah, very much so. Very much. I mean, it just shows the bond between these two characters and how they've grown in a relatively short period of time, but how he very much is acting as a father figure to the child and is hugely protective over him and will do anything and everything to make sure that he's okay.
Yes, absolutely. So then we get a revealing character moment where, you know, why are you taking off your helmets? Where did you get that armor? Because when the show started, and they always show sort of the last time on the Mandalorian sequence before the show actually kicks off, they made a big deal about, you know, have you ever taken off your helmet? Is anyone ever taking it off you? He says, never. And I said to my son, Mason, this is going to be important in this episode. And it was, but not for the reasons we find out. We finally get confirmation, and Pablo Hidalgo had talked about this on Coffee with Kenobi a couple of weeks ago with me when we talked about the Star Wars book. But he said, you know, Dave Filoni is very familiar with Sabine Wren. He created her. He also helped create Din Djarin. So he knows that Sabine takes off her helmet all the time and Din Djarin does not.
Well, now we get actual, concrete, on-screen explanation of why that is. Because Din Djarin is part of a very, I guess, almost eccentric group of Mandalorians known as the Way, and they subscribe to the old ways of Mandalore, and they do not take off their helmets. So the Mandalorian hears this, and it's almost like someone told him something about his childhood that he, I don't want to say what the equivalent would be because it's Christmas time. I don't want to ruin anything for people, but it very much felt like the rug had been pulled out from underneath him, and he says he flies off. And even the theme song of The Mandalorian was very melancholy as the sun is going down and it's getting darker. We never heard the theme song played in that fashion, man. I thought it was a very powerful character moment.
I was unsure whether he was disappointed at that or whether he was conflicted inside, because maybe he feels, well, hold on a minute, I was always told that we were the Mandalorian. And this was a group of people that did this, and now you're telling me, well, no, we're the sect. We're the different ones. So he must feel very, very conflicted about where he's come from at that point, bearing in mind he knows that he was rescued and he was brought up by the Mandalorian. So he wasn't born into it in the same way that Bo-Katan has explained that she's the third generation wearing that costume.
Right.
That armor.
And I think it's a little bit of both. I think he was disappointed, and I think he was a little dejected by the reality of that. Matt, anything you want to say about that sequence?
Yeah, I definitely felt a little bit of, judgment from Mando towards Bo-Katan and them. Just like, what are you guys doing? Like, he had never really seen anything like that. And then it kind of just shows you, and really to no fault of his own, but the blind following and the blind loyalty that he's had to really his creed his entire life. And he's kind of having this come to Jesus moment of, wait a minute, there's other people like me that they don't do this, and maybe I don't need to be doing this. And he probably had a lot of thoughts going through his mind, so I don't blame him for just wanting to fly off with the child, and kind of get out of there to think about it. But I thought it was a powerful, part of it too, and me being a big Clone Wars and Rebels fan too, seeing them show up, it's just like, if anyone's listening to this and you haven't watched Clone Wars or Rebels, like, I would truly recommend doing that to have these connections to Mando that makes these episodes so much more special.
It is bringing this entire franchise to life in unprecedented ways because, yes, we've seen Saw Gerrera, who was in Clone Wars and then in Rogue One and a little bit in Rebels. But this is different because this is a hero. I mean, Bo-Katan is a strong, powerful character. Her sister brutally murdered by Maul right in front of Obi-Wan Kenobi. Unforgettable, but then she ends up. We always wondered at the end of season 1, why does Moff Gideon have the dark saber? I thought Bo-Katan had it. So we start to kind of figure out why that is. But before I get too ahead of myself, the Mandalorian walking again at night by himself. Of course, he's ambushed because that's sort of his MO. But this time, he doesn't have to get out of it on his own because he's rescued yet again by Bo-Katan and the other two Mandalorians. We haven't mentioned the male Mandalorian. James, what do we know, if anything, about the other Mandalorian in this trio?
We don't really know a lot about either of those other two characters really at the moment, apart from the fact that they're part of the clan. And it's going to be interesting to know more as we go on. They obviously are very, very close to Bo-Katan. It's going to be intriguing to actually find out some more. And I'm hoping that we actually find out, well, we obviously need to know how she lost the Darksaber, how all of that has happened over the preceding years.
Right. And there's another great action sequence, and then he agrees to follow along, and then we find out that they need his help because, he wants to find out where the Jedi are. She says, I do know where a Jedi is. I know someone from their kind, but you're going to have to do something for me. And then we basically get, and I guess I should point out, this is one of, if not the shortest episodes of The Mandalorian that we've ever seen. And it does really go at a rapid pace, I would say. But we find out that he has to go and he has to help
recapture some weapons that the Mandalorians need because Bo-Katan ultimately wants to take back Mandalore, who Din Djarin says, no, that planet is cursed. Anybody who goes there dies.
Let's go ahead and take a quick break, and we will return with much more of the Heiress. This is Coffee with Kenobi.
This is Vanessa Marshall, and you're listening to Coffee with Kenobi.
MEI and Mouse Fan Travel is your one-stop shop for your vacation needs and your plans to Walt Disney World, Disneyland, or the cruise lines. Travel looks much different now than it did a couple of months ago, and with the opening of Walt Disney World and soon, hopefully, the opening of Disneyland, you need a place to go where you can trust, and they will help you figure out and navigate all the different circumstances and guidelines that Disney has put out for you. And I can say that we had our vacation modified, and as soon as dates were announced, MEI contacted me directly to help me reschedule, which is exactly what I was hoping to do. So if you are interested in rescheduling your vacation or want to try to plan a Walt Disney World, Disneyland vacation, or anywhere else you want to go on the planet, be sure to contact MEI and Mouse Fan Travel at www.coffeewithkenobi.com/mousefantravel. Their signature service and expert advice will help you maximize your vacation time and dollar, and they will help you figure out all the different changes and modifications going on at the Disney theme parks. They are amazing, and I can tell you, honestly, from the bottom of my heart, the peace of mind that Becky Menken and the crew at MEI and Mouse Fan Travel have given me is invaluable. If you're interested at all, again, go to www.coffeewithkenobi.com/mousefantravel.
And I've often wondered, how can a planet that is just full of these incredible warriors get overrun by the Empire? But we've seen, as both of you have mentioned, through the Clone Wars and through Star Wars Rebels, the Empire is kind of gone out of their way to take out Mandalorians, and the Mandalorians are trying to get things back in order the way that they want to. They need the Mandalorians' help, so we get this fantastic action sequence. It's about a good 10 minutes long. I mean, I'm not going to go through it beat by beat because I feel like the story element is more exciting. But Matt, why don't we start with you on this one? Talk about the entire sequence of them. Let's stop up to where they confront the commander of the ship at the end. So between them landing up to that point, Matt, just kind of talk about key moments from that for you.
Just a key overarching thing that I think they did really well with that scene is that ship, if I'm remembering right, you guys can correct me, but it's not that large. I mean, it's a good-sized ship, but it's not like the Death Star, or you know what I mean? They did a great job at making that ship look pretty darn big, if you ask me. You had full hallways of stormtroopers running through, which was just awesome cinematography moment there. But you had these long hallways, and not just one, but kind of multiple. And then, you kind of had that classic scene where the protagonists are behind the wall, right? And you have 6 or so stormtroopers all together, and they're shooting, they're blasting, and the protagonists, they got to find a way to get to their goal. And they've got this roadblock in the way, which is 6 stormtroopers blasting all over the hallway. And I think just one of the great parts of that scene is Mando really taking advantage of his armor, his Beskar, and saying, all right, cover me, I'm going in. Taking out, his thermal detonators or whatever he has, and going in and just getting shot left and right. I mean, just blasted. And he still makes it, and he's, pretty much out of there without a scratch. So those are a couple of key elements that I saw.
James, what about you? There's a lot of spectacular action. Matt just talked about the Beskar, and we see again and again how important the Beskar is. But what are some key moments that you think that you'll take away from that sequence?
I like the fact that after they'd secured what they wanted, and then they decide that they're going to take the ship, the Mandalorian is like, well, hold on a minute. This isn't what I signed up for. And I was waiting for the line, let's hope that we don't change the deal any further. That was
me too.
I was literally waiting for that to happen. And when they get to the cockpit and he just throws himself on the floor and takes all of those shots and then throws a couple of grenades in to the stormtroopers. But I agree, it isn't a particularly large ship. I think the ship can hold 4 TIE fighter or transport 4 TIE fighters, short range or medium range. And I loved it. I love the fact that the minute you get onto the ship, you see all the angled corridors, and it just becomes Imperial. It's just, everything shifts that way. So I thought it was done beautifully. It was beautifully shot, as it always is in this show. But it was interesting that he was willing to throw himself on the floor to progress it further forward, even though he said a few seconds earlier that he felt betrayed because this isn't what he signed up to do.
I agree. He's very much like a samurai. I think they've shown us time and again that he will sacrifice. I mean, his word is his absolute bond beyond anything most people would ever even consider as rationally possible. So there is that part of it, and then there's the fact that they work together great as a team. And I thought it was interesting, and I've watched this multiple times, as I'm sure you both have. But this is really the only time in the history of this series where the Mandalorian has kind of taken the back seat when it comes to action, because Bo-Katan and her group is really just so overpowering and so powerful and so commanding. And I found myself thinking, I wonder how the Mandalorian feels about this. I mean, he obviously doesn't feel threatened, but maybe there's a part of him that kind of resorts to this. I can sort of exhale in a way, as much as you can with someone blasting at you, because you're with your own kind. So I feel like we may see some progression as far as more of the vulnerability aspect of it. What do you think, Matt?
Yeah, I definitely agree. And before we move on from the scene, there's something from this scene when he's running and getting shot that I think just made me picture another scene from another movie. And maybe you guys have seen it, but it's Lord of the Rings, Episode 2. You guys know what I'm talking about, the Two Towers.
For sure.
And they're withholding, they're protecting the fortress, and the orc, who's kind of one of the mega orcs, goes down and he's getting shot with arrows left and right. He runs to the bottom of the fortress where all the elves are with the flames and just blows it up. That's what it kind of reminded me of, when he was running and getting shot left and right. So kind of, I don't know if there was any connection there that Dave Filoni and co were kind of thinking of, but that's definitely what it reminded me of.
It's funny because there were, if you go back a few scenes to when they went into that bar or cantina and he's eating the food and then he gets the little face hugger alien on him. And I'm taken straight back to the previous chapter where there's so many references to Alien and Aliens going on with the spiders. And then it was really, really blatant the way that creature just hugged onto the child's face.
Yeah, it was. They're doing a lot of different things here with how it all works together, and how they borrow things from different aspects of the story. Undoubtedly, a couple of quick things before we move on to, I think, some really important, impactful story progression moments. The sequence at the beginning where they realize these are Mandalorians, not just pirates, and the stormtrooper slams onto the front. Kind of the windshield, if you will, of the spacecraft. I thought was a great moment that, okay, well, this is serious. And then the great moment where they're locked in the cargo hold and the commander says, "They're what?" And all of a sudden the doors open and they all go flying out, again showing that Mandalorians use their brains over their brawn when they can, which is saying something as powerful as they are. I really liked the performance of that Imperial officer who kept saying, close the doors. He didn't feel like the typical classic British bad guy that we've seen in a lot of Star Wars films. But he seemed kind of like a nincompoop and very much flummoxed by things. And Matt, I thought that was pretty entertaining.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I just, again, with the comedic timing is like, wait, where are they? And then just boom, you just see them fly out the back. I mean, that was hilarious. I thought he, the commander or whatnot, I think he was a good character for what he was needed for. He took his orders. which was kind of a cool scene to finally see Moff Gideon, I believe for the first time this season, right? I don't think we've seen him since chapter 8, or chapter, the last episode in season 1. And so that was really cool. And he knew what he had to do. You know, I think as well, his officers, the pilots, they knew too. When Moff Gideon said, you know, you do what you need to do what needs to be done, basically, they knew, like, okay, we're about to get toasted, and immediately shot him and, you know, went down. So, yeah, I think that was definitely a great scene.
It was. So I think there are two big aspects that I want to talk about before we wrap this up. One is what we learn about the Empire, and they stated the state of the Empire in the galaxy at this time in the Star Wars timeline. And then two, the big announcement that sent cheers throughout fandoms. But James, let's start with what we learn about the Empire. Now, through Aftermath, and through different comic books, and through different novels in Star Wars, we know that the Empire is very fractured. Obviously, their two big leaders have gone away for the time being, especially when it comes to the Emperor. But this is the first time we've seen the Empire in action, truly in action. I don't really count season 1. That very much felt like a disparate group of Imperials. They didn't even have clean armor. But this feels like classic Imperial. And I'm learning about myself more and more that as much as the First Order entertains me and I like a lot about the First Order, there's nothing like the Empire for me. And so what we also learn, as I mentioned, that the Empire is very, very dark, their outlook on life. Talk about, James, the Empire in this episode and the notion of long live the Empire and how that means you're going to die, but the Empire is going to live on. Talk about that.
Well, we can see here that the Empire is still very much organized. They're gathering weapons from all over the galaxy, and they're bringing them back to one central point. They want to continue to fight. The Empire is very much a much bigger entity, and whoever's a part of the Empire is just a very, very small cog in a very, very large wheel, and you have to be prepared to die for that. And it's very much, it was very stark, and I think the two pilots knew exactly what was coming before they were killed, and it was very cleverly done. Yeah, I mean, they kept looking at each other and gulping and wondering what was going to happen. And it didn't really happen when they thought it was going to happen, which I thought was quite interesting. But I think they knew that they were going to die. I think that was sort of inevitable. The minute Moff Gideon said, well, you know what you have to do, their numbers were up. And part of me is not happy about seeing that sort of thing.
I agree.
Especially today in the world that we're living in, with everything going on and, you know, people fighting and how can I put this without being too political, but people not believing in the right to vote and everything else that's going on around the world. And I just felt that it was probably done on purpose. It was probably done to provoke a reaction, and it did get that from me. And I felt sorry for these people that had been taken in by the Empire and were, well, in some cases they haven't been taken in. In some cases they've been forced to join. Yes,
there's tragedy in it. It was like they all ran up and lined up, and Matt, I agree with that. And it reminded me kind of, in a less important way, of the first Captain America and the whole Hail Hydra thing, and that guy that shoots Dr. Erskine and how he takes that little cyanide capsule. This was the Star Wars version of the cyanide capsule. We have not seen this sort of behavior from the Empire that I can remember. And so it was a little bit startling, and it showed you just how dark and how desperate the Empire is. But interesting thing, my son said, Daddy, if they say long live the Empire, why are they dying? Because then they're not going to live. They'll have less people. And I thought, well, that's actually pretty true. I mean, what do you make of all this?
Yeah, I just, what comes to mind is the Empire is very nihilistic.
Yeah.
And James, you said it great. Everybody's just a little cog in the machine. And I believe the Empire has always been and will always be larger than, one, they let anybody know, but then two, than anyone really realizes. I mean, Star Wars could come out and make another trilogy, and the Empire could be the bad guys, and I don't think I'd be super surprised. Right? I mean, they're always finding a way, and I think one great thing about that scene, it's not all just depressing and stuff, but is it gave me original trilogy vibes, is what it did.
Yes. Yep, agreed.
With Vader just saying, your lack of faith disturbs, stuff like that. And Vader just, anybody who didn't fall in line with the Empire and what needed to happen to make the Empire thrive was just thrown to the curb. And that's exactly what happened here. And you mentioned it's kind of heartbreaking for these random middle-aged 25, 30-year-old guys who either volunteered or were forced to join, or I think back to, I believe it would have been Rebels, right? Where there's the Pilots Academy with all these young kids and stuff like that.
Yep.
I mean, most of these people, right, came as kids and joined the Empire. Some of them did. And so, it's pretty tough, but that's just kind of how the Empire is. And it doesn't surprise me at all.
No, it doesn't surprise me that they would be nihilistic, and that is a good word for it. But the fact that they had a person in charge of this vessel. He says, you may not kill me, but he certainly will, and he would rather face him. It's very similar to the end of season 1 of Rebels when the Grand Inquisitor, chooses to die as opposed to facing Vader after failing. Now, Moff Gideon is no Vader. Let's not get crazy here, but he obviously is the one that we have been led to believe is the one that's the most in charge right now, at least the one that we've met. That he may have a superior. Wouldn't that be interesting? But it certainly took Star Wars in a darker place than I think we've really seen. I think it takes it to a different level. It reminds me of different things from American history or just world history, and how the enemy will handle things. Will handle what they perceive as failure. But it wasn't all doom and gloom. We had an incredible ending. We got to hear the name Ahsoka Tano. This is the Jedi that he is supposed to reunite with. Or not reunite with because he's never met her. But, gentlemen, that feeling, and hearing she's going to a planet called Caladan, which made me happy because I have a Dungeons & Dragons character named Caladan, which I thought was pretty funny, was unbelievable. Now, whether we're going to see that right away, it seems unlikely. That seems like a heck of a great payoff for later. I have no idea. We don't speculate on Coffee with Kenobi anyway. But Matt, we'll start with you on this one. You mentioned you're a big Clone Wars and Rebels fan. We certainly, James and I are in that same boat as well. But talk about that ending thing and what went through your mind at that moment.
What went through my mind was just finally, it's here. The amount of rumors really since The Mandalorian started of Ahsoka Tano's going to be in the show. We don't know how, but she is, and just name dropping here and there from fan sites and friends of mine that we've talked about, and we've heard things, but we've never had really a clear cut, Ahsoka Tano ever in the show, and to finally get that, I think it opens a lot of doors now as well, because now we can see, what's Mando and Ahsoka's, what's their, what are they going to be like together? Because as James, I think you mentioned this earlier, Mando's very protective of the child. And so he's going to have to learn to trust this sorcerer, right? He has a jaded view of the Jedi as sorcerers, enemies of the Mandalorian. Why am I going to take this child to our enemies? And so we're going to have to kind of deal with that. So while Ahsoka Tano, as we know her in Clone Wars and Rebels, is potentially one of the most moral characters that we've ever seen in Star Wars, Mando doesn't know that about her. He doesn't know her from Adam. So I think that it's not going to be all butterflies and rainbows when they meet. I think that there's going to be some sort of getting to know each other that's going to need to happen and trust that's going to be need to build. And there might be some scenes of conflict between them to really for him to trust her. And another question that comes to my mind is Ahsoka Tano really the end goal? Because they say, yeah, she's the Jedi you're looking for. Is she really? Like, is she the one? Does she have other Jedi on Caladan that she's training that the child's going to be with? I have no idea. So I'm interested to see that as well.
Well, it's also important to point out that in the timeline, when we last saw Ahsoka at the end of Star Wars Rebels, she was going to leave to try to find Ezra Bridger. And she was going with Sabine. Well, Ahsoka obviously must be back if she's on this planet Caladan. So if that's true, we certainly open up a whole world. And again, we're going to try not to speculate too much because who knows what's going to happen. But James, it's very exciting. I know you're a massive Ahsoka fan. I would easily say that Ahsoka kind of was in my top 5 favorite Star Wars characters of all time.
Mm-hmm.
So it's going to be exciting. But I think it's also fair to say that the thrill we felt seeing Bo-Katan and how amazing Katie Sackhoff was, very, very much living this character as she did in the animated stuff, and now she is in a live-action thing. Knowing that it's not going to be Ashley Eckstein, I really kind of leaves kind of a sick taste in my mouth.
Yeah, I mean, you and I have talked about this before. I mean, first of all, we don't know what the character's been doing for the last 30-odd years. So that's going to be interesting. We don't know how she's aged. We don't know what she's necessarily going to look like. All we've really seen is the transition from her from Clone Wars to Rebels and how she's aged a bit there. It's obviously disappointing for fans of Ashley, who really embodies the character of Ahsoka, that she's not going to be portraying this character as far as we know. Although, for me, if Ashley was voicing her, I'd be very happy with that. I appreciate that Ashley and Ahsoka don't necessarily look like each other because Ahsoka's got quite an ethnic look to her. But there's no reason why she couldn't be voicing her. And that would be a huge tick, I think, for a lot of Star Wars fans if Filoni and Favreau have enabled that to happen. Because then that still keeps Ashley's role sort of intact for me.
Yeah.
So
I agree.
I'm hoping that's the way they've gone. If it's a completely, well, I think we all know who the actress is, but if it's her with her own voice, I don't know. I think I'm going to be taken out of it for a bit, which is a bit worrying. Because when we saw Bo-Katan, it was Katie.
Thrilling. Yep.
So
absolutely thrilling.
I'm hoping that Ashley is doing the voice. To me, that would be a huge, huge, huge plus for all of us who've grown up or lived through the Clone Wars and Rebels.
Yeah, absolutely. And just seeing, knowing that Ahsoka is going to make an appearance, because there's something about hearing her name, as we said earlier, in live action Star Wars is pretty exciting. And I would say, then they leave and the Mandalorian goes and picks up the child, and there's that sweet little moment. We didn't really talk about the child with the eggs in this episode. When he is around the eggs, there's a joke about, mind your manners, you know what I'm talking about, kind of a thing. But he hugs the canister with the eggs, and then he has that wonderful little bond with that little salamander creature. And when the Mandalorian takes the child away and thanks them, they both reach for each other like in desperation. And I wondered if there was some sort of a connection there. It's hard to say, but it was a lovely end. I think it's fair to say, and we forgot to do this at the beginning, so I'll ask you both to sort of give me your letter grade for the episode and your closing thoughts on what really was a spectacular episode, one of the better episodes of The Mandalorian, both for seasons 1 and 2, in my opinion. But Matt, let's start with you. Any last minute thoughts on this episode, and what would your letter grade be?
I think my letter grade would have to be, I'm just going to give it an A. I'm just going to do it, Dan. I think that this was the best Mandalorian episode we've seen in a while, possibly of this season so far. I know we're only a couple weeks in, but I really do. I think just from the heartwarming scene with the frog lady and the frog man, the comedic timing we talked about earlier, the Empire really finally feeling like the Empire again, and obviously, of course, seeing Bo-Katan, seeing Sasha Banks show up, and the action that brought. I thought it was a really well-rounded episode. The only thing that I could complain on, and this is just the fan in me, is just wishing it was longer. I mean, I think we all wish the episode was a little longer, but that's just the way it is. So yeah, I'll go out and I'll give it an A.
I love it. James, what about you? Last minute thoughts and your letter grade for this one?
I really enjoyed the episode. Always room for improvement there is. So I'm gonna say an A-. I did love it. I thought it was a fantastic episode. There were a couple of bits that just sort of took me out of it for a moment, but it just keeps getting better and better. And I don't know how much better it can get, but obviously there's so much more to come.
Yeah, I would give this one an A. On the first viewing, I would have given it an A+. For watching it, I would give it an A, just because I think it is pretty short. There isn't like a ton there. We get a couple of fun things. It may be more in-world for people who are more familiar with Clone Wars and Rebels. It would be very interesting to see what people who are not familiar with Bo-Katan and Ahsoka Tano, what they thought about the episode. But I'm sure most people would think it was exciting. I thought it was thrilling. I mean, I made no secret that last week I gave the episode a D-. I did not like the last episode at all. So this one definitely was much more of a return to form of the wheelhouse that I enjoy. But fantastic, the callback, seeing Bo-Katan, seeing the humanity of the Mandalorian and him sort of metaphorically looking into the mirror of what it means to be a child of the way, and looking forward to what that brings. And, of course, the revelation that Ahsoka Tano is going to cross his path at some point, while also seeing some compassion return to the child, was very, very welcoming, very rewarding, and it certainly has been fun.
Listening to Coffee with Kenobi, you are, with Dan Z, the podcast you're looking for. This is...
That's going to do it for this week's show. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to have a cup of coffee with me, and for helping to spread the word about our Star Wars family we've got here at Coffee with Kenobi. Be sure to tune in Monday nights at 8 o'clock p.m. Central Standard Time on Facebook Live at www.coffeewithkenobi.com/live or www.facebook.com/coffeewithkenobi and have a cup of coffee, tea, or any beverage of your choosing with me as we continue the conversation. To join us in the CWK Cafe, which is our Facebook group, and share your Star Wars thoughts, comments, reviews, and opinions in a family-friendly, spoiler-free place that is also drama-free, go to www.coffeewithkenobi.com/community and be part of the conversation, talk about this week's show, or just talk about some Star Wars. It is a lot of fun, and you'll make some new friends as well as catch up with longtime friends along the way. I also want to thank all of the new and longtime members of the CWK Alliance and let you know how much I appreciate your help and encouragement. A big thank you to our CWK Alliance members, Mary Perdue, Jason Hall, Dennis Keithley, Ross Hollowin, Cato McNichol, Alexander Moylan, Jim Capron, Smooth Rivera, Tyler Pompa, Frank Mulder, Colby Mead, LJ Souter, Daz Davies, Dustin Mills, Robert Avila, Terry King, Jeff Ellis, David Nicely, Chris Gavarka, Angela Sauce, Aaron Heiress, Greg McLaughlin, Eric Struthers, Christine Turk, Brian McKinney, Alex Procasio, Hannah, Susan Gray, Ian Thompson, Dan Ream, Christian Dale, JC Poe, Ed Kimoto, Blake Weaver, Chelsea Sansbury, Yancey Evans, Craig Hargrove, Chris Metz, Connie Shee, Mark Suter, Jared Cantor, Kurt McKellen, Thea Selby, and Simbat Defterdarian. If you want to join the CWK Alliance, be sure to go to www.coffeewithkenobi.com/CWK Alliance and sign up today. Not only will you help out Coffee with Kenobi, but you will also get access to CWK Pour-Over, the exclusive weekly podcast not heard anywhere else. It's a great way to support and help out the show, and 10% of your monthly contributions go directly to the St. Jude Children's Hospital to support the incredibly important work they are doing to help these brave children and their families. Plus, contributors at the CWK All-Star level can watch a video podcast of CWK Pour-Over hosted by me, Tom Gross, and Corey Clubb. Feel free to reach out if you have any questions. In addition to being part of the community on Facebook, please don't forget to visit our website at www.coffeewithkenobi.com for Star Wars news, announcements, reviews, live video, and so much more. If you have a question for me or just want to share your thoughts on the air, please feel free to reach out to me at danz@coffeewithkenobi.com, and I'll share them on the show. You can also connect with me on Twitter at Mr. Zer, MRZEHR. There are also a lot of ways to connect with me and Coffee with Kenobi on social media. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram. Give us a like on Facebook at facebook.com/coffeewithkenobi, and check us out on Pinterest. You can find me twice a month on the podcast Looking at Lucasfilm, part of the Jim Hill Media Podcast Network, and you can find my writing on CWK's website, as well as StarWars.com, where I'm an official blogger there, as well as on IGN, where I contribute articles on Star Wars, as well as other popular culture topics. And if you're considering starting a podcast or a blog, let me know how I can help you get started and help you make your creative vision a reality. Be sure to check out danzmedia.com and we can get the process started. I'm also available to come to your school, conference, business, or organization to talk about how to tap into your strengths and help you bring out your very best. You can take that first step into a larger world. Thanks as always to our CWK sponsors, especially MEI and Mouse Fan Travel, our travel partner and your one-stop shop for all things Walt Disney World, Disneyland, the Disney Cruise Lines, or anywhere on the planet. Please go to www.coffeewithkenobi.com/mousefantravel to book your magical vacation and help support Coffee with Kenobi in the process. And don't forget to pre-order my brand new book that I wrote alongside Pablo Hidalgo and Cole Horton, The Star Wars Book, published by DK. Be sure to pre-order your copy of the Star Wars book today. I can't wait to share it with each and every one of you. If you like the show, please tweet out that you're listening, share it on Facebook, or invite your friends and family to tune in and share a cup of coffee with us. And if the Force is especially with you, please take a couple of minutes to rate and review the show on iTunes or Google Podcasts. Every review makes a huge difference and helps to spread the word. Go to iTunes and search Coffee with Kenobi and you'll see the show there. My circle of friends has grown so much because of this podcast and each and every one of you, and it means so much to me that we have such a wonderful Star Wars community. Thank you all so much for all you do.
Matt, what a wonderful joy to have you on Coffee with Kenobi. You know, we talked at the beginning of the show. I had such a great time getting to know you. It was so awesome for you to think to reach out and have me on WMBD to talk about the Star Wars book and what I do in the classroom, things like that. So, man, how awesome to have you on Coffee with Kenobi. Thank you so much for being on it. Please let people know where they can reach out to you if they want to continue the conversation.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it was a joy, you know, when you mentioned, yeah, maybe we can do Coffee with Kenobi sometime. And I've been looking forward to this, and I thought we had an awesome connection when it came to Star Wars and just a conversation we had, and that story just really turned out great. And so I appreciate you doing that and having me on. And I hope, you know, we can obviously do this again and keep working together in the future on other projects as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I look forward to that. And people are going to undoubtedly want to say, I want to hear more about this Matt Sheehan. I want to see what Matt thinks about these next episodes of Rebels. So until the next time you're on Coffee with Kenobi, which of course you will certainly be back on, we'd love to have you on the show. But where can people reach out to you on Twitter, etc.?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, if you want to do Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, I've got all. My professional page on Facebook is just Matt Sheehan TV. It's where I kind of post my news stories and stuff like that. I've got my messages open. Twitter, which I have, you know, right on my phone. It's just the Matt_Sheehan. And then Instagram is the Matt Sheehan, all kind of one word. So messages are open on any of those. Feel free to send me something and let's keep talking about it. And, you know, if anybody else, you know, wants to work on projects and stuff like that, you know, I'm always free. I'm always looking to do stuff like this.
I love it. Well, thanks again, Matt and James. I'm guessing that most people know how to get a hold of you because you've been such a long-standing, powerful force in fandom and just an overall wonderful guy. So, James, let everybody know where they can reach out to you and let everybody know what's going on in the world of Jedi News.
So Jedi News is JediNews.com, and on social we are Jedi News Network, and we're Jedi News Network on all of the social media channels, whether it be Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, etc., etc. So you can find us there. If you want to reach out to me personally, then on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, I'm at Planet Burns.
Wonderful being able to chat with James and Matt to discuss the Heiress. What a spectacular episode. I hope you enjoyed watching it and talking about it with us as much as we enjoyed sharing the conversation with you. Just like last week, we will have 2 Coffee with Kenobis this week. And in a couple of days, you're going to hear an extended conversation with the incredible Steve Sansweet of Rancho Obi-Wan discussing the Rancho Obi-Wan Virtual Gala that is coming up on November 21st. It's going to be a great time. I'll be sure to be there, and I hope I will see each and every one of you there as well. Have a great week, everybody, and we will be back very, very soon with more Coffee with Kenobi. This is the podcast you're looking for.
This podcast is not endorsed by the Walt Disney Company or Lucasfilm Limited. It is intended for entertainment and informational purposes only. The official Star Wars website can be found at www.starwars.com. Star Wars, all names, sounds, and any other Star Wars-related items are registered trademarks and or copyrights of Disney and their respective trademark and copyright holders. All original content of this podcast is the intellectual property of Coffee with Kenobi unless otherwise indicated.
This is the podcast you're looking for.